Good afternoon and welcome everybody to today's seminar, Your U.S. Government Security Clearance and What You Need to Know. This afternoon, we have Dr. Kevin Gamache with us. He's the Chief Research Security Officer for the A&M system. Just a reminder, we ask that you remain muted during the presentation and questions will be taken at the end and through the chat function available at the bottom of your screen. Today's seminar will be recorded and can be accessed through the National Laboratories Office website and YouTube channel after this presentation has completed. Dr. Gamache, we'll turn it over to you from there.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everybody. I appreciate you joining us this evening. One of our responsibilities in the Research Security Office is management of the security clearance process for the A&M system. And I would like to spend this evening giving you an understanding of what the security clearance process is all about, and hopefully also sharing some helpful hints that will make the process a little easier for you as you go through it for what I assume is the first time for most, if not all of you. So next slide, please. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is a security clearance? A clearance is a personnel security determination by a competent authority that an individual is eligible for access to national security information. And along with that determination comes the ability to perform duties that have been designated as national security sensitive. National security eligibility is a determination that a person is able and willing to safeguard national security information. The three national security clearance eligibility levels are confidential, secret, and top secret. A national security eligibility is a determination that you are eligible for access to classified information and or eligible to hold a national security sensitive position. Keep in mind that not everyone is granted a favorable eligibility determination. Many people go through the process and after adjudication are determined to be not eligible for access to classified information. Only those reasonably determined not to be a national security risk are granted eligibility and permitted to handle classified information or hold a national security position. So ultimately, the purpose of national security eligibility is to determine whether you are able and willing to safeguard classified national security information or hold a national security position based upon your loyalty, character, trustworthiness, and reliability. Okay, next slide. What is classified information? Classified information is official information or material that requires protection in the interest of national security. Classified information is information which means, or is national security information, which means that it relates to the national defense or foreign relations of the United States. If classified information is mishandled or given to the wrong person, it could harm our country's security or that of our allies. Next slide. So why do we need national security determinations in the first place? In a nutshell, the security eligibility process is a procedure that helps us make sure national security information is not given to people who can't be trusted. And we have a very involved process for determining that trustworthiness that we'll spend a little bit of time talking about tonight. Next slide. For many of you that will be getting into programs or internships with the intelligence community, there's another concept that you need to be familiar with, and that is special sensitive positions. These positions require access to sensitive compartmented information. Positions that could cause inestimable damage to the national security and or immeasurable compromise to technologies, plans, procedures vital to the strategic advantage of the United States. So I talked about the three levels of classification, confidential, secret, and top secret. These special sensitive positions are designed to allow access to programs at above the top secret level. Next slide. So what exactly is sensitive compartmented information? SCI is that information or materials that, because of their sensitivity, require special restricted handling within intelligence collection programs. So if you are applying for SCI access, that tells us, and it should mean to you, that the program that you are applying for is one of the 16 members of the U.S. intelligence community. So this is not a clearance, it's a level of access above top secret. Okay, next slide. Let's look at the security clearance process here for just a minute. There are different levels of investigation that are used dependent upon what level of clearance you're applying for. You may hear things like a level 3 or level 5. A level 3 background investigation is for confidential or secret clearance. These are typically non-critical sensitive positions, secret level on the DoD side, or if you're applying for work with a national lab, they use a different terminology for information at that level. It's called an L clearance. These investigations don't take nearly as long as a tier 5 investigation for a top secret clearance. They normally are completed within 60 days. For those of you that are applying for internships with National Security Agency or Defense Intelligence Agency, all of those clearance investigations are the highest level, tier 5, for top secret sensitive compartment information, or a Q clearance with Department of Energy. And those clearances take at least 180 days just for the top secret access, and can take up to a year for complete SCI access. So as you start applying for some of these programs, it's really important to understand just how time consuming the security clearance application process is. And it's in your interest to lean forward in terms of filling out the required paperwork, getting everything submitted on time, because the investigators are really working against some very strict timelines to get you into those internships between the spring that you apply for it and the summer that the internship applies. They dedicate special effort on these clearances to get you through the process quicker than what would normally be possible. So just be very sensitive to the timelines when you're asked to submit the paperwork. Another thing I need to point out is that security clearance eligibility is limited to US citizens only. Okay, next slide. So let's take a look at the process. You will get notification that you've been selected for an internship, or if you're applying for a job, you'll be asked to initiate the security clearance process. This process starts in a database that all of government uses. It's called EQIP, E-QIP. So that'll be where you pull all your information together, submit it into this online database. And once the investigating agency gets that, they'll schedule your investigation, which often begins with automated record checks like criminal background investigation checks, credit checks, that kind of thing. Once all of those are completed, depending upon what level of clearance you are applying for, your investigation may be complete at that time after they've done all of the automated record checks. If you're going to a higher level of clearance like top secret, it's going to require some field work where investigators actually go out and talk to your former employers, your current employers, your friends, and that kind of thing. So your investigation will look different dependent upon what level of investigation or what level of clearance is going to be required. So after that 60-day or 6-month process of investigation, all of that information is pulled together and given to a government adjudicator who actually makes the decision on whether you are eligible for a clearance or not. Okay, next slide. So what areas will the background investigation check? They'll look at your complete employment history, which for most of you is only going to go back to your 18th birthday. They'll look at your education. They'll check your references that you've listed in your security clearance application. If you have a military service record, that's part of the background investigation. If you have any foreign connections, activities, or travel that you've listed in your application, all of that is looked at. They'll take a look at your financial history, whether or not you have a police record, drug and alcohol abuse, if that is relevant, or psychological conditions, once again, if that is relevant. So it's a pretty comprehensive background investigation. Next slide. So once the investigation is complete, an adjudicator will review all of the information. If there is nothing within that background investigation that was discovered that raises a security concern, you will be granted favorable eligibility for access to classified information. If there are things that they've uncovered that are of concern, they will look at mitigating factors that they may be able to use to continue to move you forward in the process. If they can't find sufficient mitigating factors, then the result would be an unfavorable determination on your security clearance application, and you would not be eligible for access to classified information. All right, so next slide, please. So there are 13 things that once all of the information is pulled together, that government adjudicator is going to make a determination on. The most important is allegiance to the United States. They're also going to look at foreign influence, foreign preference, sexual behavior, and that is with a criminal focus on it when they're looking at sexual behavior, as if there was any criminal activity involved with sexual behavior. Personal conduct is looked at, financial considerations, alcohol consumption, drug involvement and substance misuse, psychological conditions, criminal conduct, handling of protected information. You know, if you were a hacker in high school or things like that come into play in a adjudication process. They take a look at your outside activities and also use of information technology. Next slide. So this adjudication process can be very quick, or it can take a period of months. And you know that this can be problematic when you're applying for a summer internship. For example, if you've lived or worked in several geographic locations, or if you've lived overseas, that's going to cause the security clearance investigation to take longer. If you've traveled outside of the United States extensively, that's going to impact the length of the investigation. If you have relatives who've have lived or live outside the United States, once again, that is going to slow things down. And then if there is information in your background that is difficult to obtain or involves issues that require an expansion of your case, that could be a potential roadblock as well. So these are just, you know, as you start applying for jobs or internships and consider the timelines that are already pretty strict. These are the kinds of things that you also need to be aware of that may slow that process down. And, you know, I've seen cases where an individual applies for a summer internship and they're not selected because the clearance process could not be completed in time as a result of extensive foreign connections or foreign travel. And, you know, sometimes that results in you being deferred to the next summer for that internship, just because many of these internships, you have to have the clearance in place before you arrive. Next slide. So there are some helpful tips for completing your paperwork. The first is you've got to be completely accurate, complete. Your answers have to be honest. And I can't emphasize that enough. When you fill out your security clearance paperwork, be completely honest. You know, there may be something in your background that you're not proud of, or that you think will result in you not getting a clearance. That adjudicator may not feel the same way about it, but the one sure way that you can shoot your chances of getting a clearance is if you're not honest in the application process. As you go through the process, if you have any questions whatsoever on how to answer a question, or you know, just how to fill the paperwork out, use my office as a resource. We have a number of people that are here to help you to make sure that the application is accurate and complete when you submit it. If you omit any kind of adverse information, that in itself is likely going to be interpreted as falsification of your security form by that adjudicator and will result in you not being determined eligible for a security clearance. So be complete, be completely honest, and be accurate when you fill the paperwork out. Next slide. So I was just talking earlier to our hosts about the timelines that some of you are facing for internships. And I know the applications in particular for the NSA internships this summer are coming up the middle of next month. What I would encourage you to do is find and I know it's posted on the OnRamp's website, find a copy of the standard form 86, which is the questionnaire for national security positions. You see it on the left side of the screen there. Find that, use it as a tool for pulling all the information that you're going to need for your application together. That's something that you can start right now, because you will need addresses of all your former employers. You'll need addresses for your high school, for any college that you've attended. You'll need addresses for your immediate family, your mother, your father, your brothers, your sisters. You're going to need addresses for references. So this is a very, very complete process and takes a lot of time the first time you do it. So I would recommend that you get that form, start filling it out now, and then you would have it all in front of you when you go through the official application process, which will be through eQuip, the electronic application that you'll have to do officially. But that is the best way to handle the volume of information that you're going to have to report, is to pull it all together first and then log into the online database and put all that information in. Okay. Next slide. So there's one other requirement that that anybody that is going to be applying for SCI access will have to undergo, and that's a polygraph. And the requirements are different depending upon which agency you're going to. Some agencies like NSA require a full scope polygraph. Some agencies like Defense Intelligence Agency require only a counterintelligence polygraph. You know, this is just one of the things we have to do to have access at that level. My biggest recommendation for you on the polygraph requirement is just go in, take the test. I've seen people get into trouble by trying to research how to beat the test. That is not something that you want to do. I've taken a number of polygraph tests. They're always intimidating, but the last thing that you want to do is try to beat it, because once again, that's going to result in you being determined ineligible for access to classified information. So
I have a question.
Sure.
So regarding the polygraph, would there be any way, like, what if you psych yourself out and, like, I guess would you say, like, you betray your own answer?
Well, you know, people get nervous when they take the polygraph. That's just a given. What that results in very often is you just have to go back, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 times. But you know, in the end, it has been my experience that the process works. So I think the more you can go with the flow, the better off you're going to be when it comes to a polygraph.
I see. Thank you.
Yep. All right, I think that was the last slide. I think the next slide is the question slide. So I know this is just kind of a brief and very quick overview, but be happy to answer any questions you might have. I hate to say this, but I've had an SCI level clearance and access for 40 years. So I've been around the block more than once with the security clearance process, and would be happy to share my experience.
So Kevin, we do have a couple of questions in the chat. How long do polygraphs typically take?
Oh, when you're doing them, it seems like forever. Normally, between an hour and 2 hours. They actually, when they take you in for a polygraph, will sit you down, make you as comfortable as you can as they can with the process, and then kind of do a dry run with you before they do the actual polygraph. So that process takes a little bit of time, but between an hour and 2 hours.
And how long after you submit the EQUIP form will you be requested to do the polygraph?
A lot of that's going to depend upon the agency. Some agencies will grant you SCI access with the understanding that you're subject to a polygraph, and you won't have to take it before you actually get access. Other agencies require that full scope poly before they even give you access. So the answer to that question is it depends.
Okay, and is there any way to obtain a clearance preemptively or only once you're selected for a job?
Nope, you can't just apply for a clearance. That has the requirement has to come from a legitimate government need for you to have access to classified.
And if you start that process of a security clearance and you're denied for any reason, will they tell you why?
There is a process that allows you allows you the opportunity to appeal, and you will be made aware of why you were found ineligible. So you're entitled to some due process.
Okay, so we had another question, actually two questions related. Does a dual citizenship or a US citizen that's lived most of their life outside of the US preclude eligibility?
It doesn't preclude eligibility, but it complicates it. The dual citizenship complicates it. I know people who are dual citizens that have clearances. Certainly, the amount of time that it takes to do a background investigation when you've spent most of your life outside the United States, it just makes the amount of time longer, which if you're applying for an internship makes it a little difficult. But neither one of those will keep you from getting a clearance.
There's been a couple of questions submitted, whether political affiliations, ideologies, or having foreign friendship connections, non-business related, affect your clearance eligibility.
There's certainly factors in the adjudication process. Whether they impact your ability to get a clearance, I think, just depends on the situation. But those are things that are considered in the adjudication process.
Okay. This student has a question as to, as college students, where in our applications should we be concerned? They've moved every year for school, back home for summers, and have also traveled abroad multiple times. Is that going to create a problem, or will they just have to submit all that information?
Yeah.
Can I clarify that question really quick?
Sure.
I submitted that question, and when I say I've moved every year for school, I mean, like, for example, my freshman year I lived in a dorm, and then my sophomore year I lived in an apartment complex, still at the same university at TAMU, but a little bit further away, and then I changed my apartment complex. So I've been a student at TAMU every year. I've just lived in a different apartment complex and then gone home during the summers for internships.
Yeah, so you have to list every place that you lived. You know, unfortunately, that's difficult for college students when you're living in a different place every semester. But you know, I mean, it's understood that that's just part of being a college student. It's not going to impact whether you get a clearance or not. You'll just have to make sure that you put all that on the SF-86 or the EQIP when you fill it out. And that's
what about for like foreign travel, like study abroads in the same aspect?
All of that has to be listed as well. And you know, if you anticipate that you're going to be in government work or industry where a security clearance is required, I would do two things. One, the first time you fill out the SF-86 is the hardest. Make sure that that you protect that original SF-86, because every time you update your clearance, you're going to have to come back to that and reuse some of that information. So just make sure that you keep that in your important documents. The other thing is, you know, if you're traveling or if you have traveled outside the country, every trip is going to have to be reported. So, you know, keep good records because that's going to be important when you fill out the application. And, you know, as to the question of whether moving frequently will impact your ability to get a clearance. I was an Air Force brat. My dad retired from the Air Force. I spent 25 years in the Air Force. My move to College Station was my 23rd move, and it hasn't impacted my ability to get or keep a clearance. So it's just makes record keeping a little more difficult.
Good to know. Zachary asked, could you explain a bit more about the financial portion of the vetting process?
Yeah, you know, what they are looking for there is your ability to properly discharge your debts. Do you have any demonstrated cases of financial irresponsibility? You know, and ultimately, what they're trying to determine by that is, one, can you live within your means, and two, you know, are there any situations out there that might make you susceptible to bribery or influence from a foreign party. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yes, sir, that does.
Thanks.
Audrey asked, how close to an applicant is close enough that a foreign national needs to be reported on your application?
Yeah, so the general guidelines or if it is, if it's a close and continuing relationship, which, if you had a roommate that was not a U.S. citizen, that would fit in the close and continuing relationship. And then there's another caveat that is trying to think the exact words, but if it's bound by bonds of affection, I think it is the way it is often used. So, if you were in a relationship with someone who was a foreign national, that's also something that's reportable. But, if you sat next to somebody in class, that's not something you have to worry about.
How far back do you need to go, even if you're estranged from that person or cut off from them?
The guidance for somebody getting an SCI clearance is you have to go back 10 years on everything. So at the top secret or SCI level, you have to go back 10 years. For a secret clearance, you have to go back 7 years.
And a couple of people have asked if you can clarify, is it all records that just go back to your 18th birthday, or does anything before that apply?
Well, there'll be some things that apply prior to your 18th birthday, but things like jobs and schools and where you've lived, obviously, those go back 10 years. But there are going to be things like you're dealing with your immediate family. If you had any, I'm trying to think here, the criminal stuff only goes back to your 18th birthday. There are some things on the SF-86, and I can't recall all of them off the top of my head, but they will say, have you ever? Whereas most of the questions on the SF-86 will say within the last 10 years. So it'll be, if you take a look at the form, it's pretty clear in those small number of cases where you have to go back more than 10 years. And for those of you that are undergraduates or even in graduate school, it's you go back 10 years or to your 18th birthday. So you don't go past your 18th birthday on most of that stuff.
Okay, we had a question that if you've had a restricted access clearance in the past, will that help speed up the process for a new application?
I think generally yes, because there's still a record of that. And that is one of the questions that you're asked in the application process is, have you ever been granted a clearance? And then they want to know, the dates and what level of that clearance. So there will be some positive benefit to having been through the process before.
And based on your experience, how in detail will the security office investigation get when they start checking your references and people that you listed on your application?
It's kind of hard to answer because you don't always get feedback on who they contacted and who they didn't. Generally when you put references down, I think they'll ask you to put 3 references, 3 personal references, but then you also have to put your employers and your landlords and that kind of thing. The one thing that I think you can be sure of is that they will at least talk to the 3 references that you listed, and usually they talk to the references to get other references. And they will always talk to your, your immediate supervisor.
Yeah, this is Dilma da Silva. I have been, asked for information from people who worked for me many times. In some cases now, students that I supervised. I found the questions very generic. It is really just trying to see the impression about the kind of thing that was on the form that Dr. Gamache was telling us about. Do you think that, have you ever know the person had financial problems, had problems with alcohol, those kind of things? But it's a very, in my experience, and I've done a large number, it's very short interview.
Yeah, the interviews normally take 15 minutes, I think, generally.
Okay, and then we had a question. Do research scientists like biologists who work for the U.S. government usually need security clearances for their job, or is it completely just dependent on the institution and what type of work?
Yeah, it's dependent a lot upon the institution, where you're working, what kind of projects you're working on. There are some government agencies where you have to have a clearance just to get into the building, no matter what you're doing. So it's really kind of hard to make a characterization just based upon what your career path is.
I've noticed a few people asking questions based on GPA, pay levels, details like that. That's going to depend on your internship. So just watch out when you're applying as to the requirements, and then you should be able to find out what kind of security level that would be. That's all the questions. I think we've covered everything in the chat. So, I mean, if anybody else has questions, please feel free to either submit or you can unmute yourself.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So I recently got a secret level clearance in this past summer through my internship. And I will be in process of getting the TS clearance again. But my only concern is, like, what is the processing time between submission of the equip and getting that clearance if I already have the secret level?
Well, already having the secret level will speed things up. It'll speed it up a lot. The other thing that will speed it up is, or will have an impact is, which agency you're getting the internship with, because some of the agencies do their own background investigations and can do them much quicker than the 95% of the investigations that are done by Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. So if you're going to be doing an internship with one of the intelligence agencies, chances are the clearance process will be a lot quicker because they all do their own.
Okay, we did have one other question. Can a non-US citizen get a clearance, or is there some kind of shortened clearance process that they could get for some labs and not others?
No, a basic requirement for a US government clearance is that you have to be a US citizen. There is something called a limited access authorization, which is not really a security clearance, but that is the mechanism that is used for non-US citizens. It's called a limited access authorization.
Okay, do we have anybody else that has any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so within the past 10 years, there have been a couple of periods in my life where I was living with people in kind of a sublet situation, but it was never anything official. There wasn't any sort of documentation other than kind of like a handshake agreement type of thing. I didn't keep records of that, and I've since become out of touch with the people involved. So if I don't know the information, I don't know how to get the information. How does that come into play with the security clearance?
Yeah, my recommendation would be just report as much as you know or as much as you remember, and then use the remarks sections to explain, you know, the information that's missing. You know, the bottom line is just disclose as much as you can. I mean, if you don't know, you don't know, and you know, if you don't remember, just put as much information down as you can.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, well, if there's no more questions, then we'll say thank you to Dr. Gamache. We appreciate your input, and we look forward to having more Aggies out there. So thank you everybody for your time, and this recording will be posted as soon as it's available.
All right, good evening, everybody.